we are here at Mike and Penn, and we're going to do an interview with the inestimable Sher Davidson, who I'm very excited to get to know. She's a colorful person, and I think we share many of the same interests. So,
I think
welcome, Sher.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here because I'm in the very exciting last week before uploading all of the things I need to upload to my publisher before the publication of my book. So
Oh,
it's a week filled with lots of things to do.
yeah. Well, yes. Please show us your books.
Well, I guess what we could say is this will be interesting to people who aren't writers. This is what a manuscript looks like.
Oh, yes.
So that is the manuscript of the new book. And then my very first book, published in 1973, next year will be the 50th anniversary, is this one. And
Oh,
that is a travel memoir about the wonderful journey that my husband and I made with our two daughters, who were just 3.5 and 5.5 actually. And
hmm.
I knew nothing about writing in those days. I loved to write. I had written in college a lot, but I really didn't know what I was doing. And in 6 weeks, I sent out not even the full manuscript, and I had a publisher with an advance.
Amazing.
And that doesn't happen
An
anymore. Believe
advance
me,
is a nice thing to
it,
have.
it doesn't happen. It was distributed by Scribner and they sold 15,000 copies, and it was very exciting. But I was so busy trying to support my family because my husband was going back for a graduate degree and teaching credential. So I didn't write for 39 years after that. I
Amazing.
I was busy doing other things. This is the book that was published most recently in 2014, and very much influenced by my living in Mexico, by my work with refugees, by my work in El Salvador, and previous to that, Nicaragua. So very different from the other book. A novel inspired
Okay.
by those experiences. I often say that it is a late life love story wrapped around the issue of immigration.
Okay. Well, tell us a little more about that. That sounds really intriguing.
Well, what more can I tell you? Um,
Who's the main character?
the main character is a woman by the name of Angela, and she's from the Northwest, from Seattle, and she loves doing humanitarian aid work in Latin America. And she goes down there and she meets a gentleman who's from another part of the country, Boston, and they are enjoying helping a small rural village and working with a project there. And they meet a beautiful young woman and her darling daughter, who are in desperation to join the father who has gone over the border into California and is working on a flower farm there. And they want to get to the border and see if they can go into the United States. So it's a journey they take. The couple, who are still getting to know each other, they decide to take this young woman and her daughter. Now, one of them is not quite as in agreement that it's a great, safe thing to do as the other. I won't
Ah.
tell you which. And they go up through Guatemala and Mexico, and all along they meet very interesting people. They have some difficulties where they have a very scary, life-threatening occurrence.
Mm.
And so it's a journey. It's a journey. And I guess that's a metaphor for my life too, is that my life has been an adventurous journey.
That sounds like it. Starting off in a van in Europe, and then
Yeah,
you have quite the experiences in Central America.
yeah,
Is
it,
that
it
true?
really has been fun.
And now, where are you? Where did you write this present book?
This present book was written in West Lynn, Oregon, which is a suburb of Portland. The current book was inspired during a visit with my cousins. I'm of Swedish heritage. And then we went on to Sweden to meet my relatives who live in the south of Sweden. They live in very close to Malmö. In fact, at that time they were in Malmo, then now they've moved because they bought a forest. They sold their businesses. They had businesses in Malmo. My great uncle sold that, and they were able to buy a beautiful plots of land. And when we visited many years later, we were pleasantly surprised with this Blekinge forest, which is in my book, and that's
Oh,
on their land.
ah,
And of course, I've tried to use that's the one actual name I used. For some of the towns, I've used created, made up names, invented names, because I haven't wanted to say anything that would reflect back on the little towns of that part of Sweden. So those are invented. And it was inspired by a cousin of mine who I'm very close to. Torkel is his name. And he told me at a dinner table conversation some very interesting things about Sweden, and some things that were very much a part of the history of Sweden. And also, we started to discuss World War II and the fact that Sweden was a neutral nation, which I was very happy about. And then he said, but now I won't tell you what he said. And that inspired me to have an idea for a book. And in fact, that very night, I was staying in a little cabin on my cousin's property, and I looked out through a lace curtain into the moonlight out by a small little pond. And the ideas just started coming to me for this story. So it has a lot of mystery to it.
mm,
And it is historical fiction. Most of it is based on a lot of history, but there's, of course, it's fiction too. So I've added a lot of elements. So that's the background for the current story, which, by the way, is looking for a title. And
oh,
I'm going to be asking people on my website or on my blog. I've got to post that today, in fact, to help me title it. It's been all along, the working title has been um, Secrets Left Behind. But I'm reconsidering. There's a lot of very similar titles so on Amazon. So I've got about 4 choices. I'm going to ask my readers
mm.
to vote.
Oh, wow. Well, tell us what the choices
Okay.
are.
It's Memories That Haunted. Memories That Haunted. The other one is Haunting Memories, and Haunted by Memories, because it's a story of intergenerational trauma. There's a trauma that happens to a woman, Helga, in we don't know what that trauma is. And we start with the main protagonist is Lena, her granddaughter. And her granddaughter has to listen to her nightmares that often wake her up with a scream. And this really affects the granddaughter's life, her young life, as she aspires to be a writer and gets a scholarship to go study in Paris, France. Her sleeplessness, her insomnia is getting worse and worse. And her mother has to encourage her to go to Sweden. Now, there's some things that happen in between I'm not going to give away, but she encourages her to go to Sweden to try to find out what happened in the late summer of 1939, just before Hitler invaded Poland, that might have been the cause of an event that affected the grandmother all of her life from then
Mm,
on. The grandmother had gone back to Sweden to see her brothers on their southern Sweden farm, and something must have happened that caused this great trauma in her life. And that is passed down. I'm very interested in epigenetics. It's a very new
oh, me
science.
too.
Are you? Yeah. Oh, good. We're going to have lots in common. And it's such an interesting new field where they're really discovering that trauma is passed down through generations.
Mhm.
And so the mystery then is for Lena to find out what that was so that maybe she can go on to lead her life without this sleep problem that's affecting everything. Her studies at the Sorbonne, a new romance, her first romance, and
Oh, a first romance.
a first romance, yeah.
Oh,
So that's kind of gives you a little summary of what it is about.
oh, excellent. Thank you.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
you have a most intriguing synopsis for both your books.
They involve journeys, they involve foreign places, and characters that are also, I think, very unique. Of course, everyone is unique, but I think they reflect my long-time life interest in other cultures, in traveling. This is what has fascinated me since I was very, very young, and history too. And having been born right during the middle, 1942, we would have talks around the dinner table about World War II, about history, about other places. And something hit me that I wanted to study French. So I studied French in college and high school, both. I had 8 years of French, and I got my first job in France. So that was a wonderful opening of the world to me. Until then, I had never been in a foreign country. So at 21 years old, I flew off to France, and that kind of inspired a lot of what I write about too.
What work did you do in France?
My job, I took the Foreign Service exam and I did quite well, but they didn't have a position for me in the Foreign Service. But they said, "Oh, we have a position for you in something called the Army Special Services." And this was post World War II. There were still American bases in Germany and France and a few other places. And they started service clubs, which were what we might call recreation centers on the military bases, where the enlisted men could go and access a billiards room and television, which was that size at that time, and a game room, and have activities and go on tours. And I was hired to be a special services person who would work in the service club. And one of my jobs was to take the soldiers on tours.
Oh, so cool.
It was great because it gave me the chance. Well, I met my very first French girlfriend, my girlfriend of 51 years, and no longer than that now, 57 years. And she and I met the second day I was on the military base because she was the secretary to the liaison, the French liaison officer. And I had to go there to pick up maps and brochures because I had to get going and plan these trips for these soldiers. I also taught French classes to the soldiers, which they often wanted when they had French girlfriends. So it was a very interesting experience. And Michelle, my French girlfriend, helped me a great deal, and we became the closest. We were like sisters, and we still are. We have a very long friendship. So her family kind of took me in too, and I had my own little house. I got through the military. I was in a civilian employee, but through the military and the special services, I got quarters allowance. And then I thought it was exciting pay because it was more than I had ever made, but in today's standards, it was very low. But I did get a very cute little house in a neighboring village. I bought a little Simca. I drove up to Paris on my weekends. It was very exciting.
You lived a life.
I
Wow.
lived a life. Yeah, I was very, very lucky. And then I was even luckier when I came home after my 2 years there and I went back to college to get a teaching credential. Those were the years where a woman didn't have as many options. If we wanted to use our education, we either had to be a nurse or a secretary or a teacher. And I decided I would like teaching, and I went back to get a teaching credential, and that's where I met my husband, and at San Francisco State College, and then the rest is kind of history. We were there in 71. We started out in September of 71. The book wasn't published till 73 because we didn't get back to the United States until the late winter of 72. And I started sitting at a typewriter at my little dining room table in a small little rented house. And my dad gave me his old Underwood typewriter. And it was pre computers. And I would work all day in the little jewelry shop I started and then come home and work on the story. We started out in Sweden. We started going north from Germany. We picked up our Volkswagen in Germany, went north to Sweden and Denmark, took our daughters to the Hans Christian Andersen museum. We were in a Volkswagen bus because we had the two little girls, but we couldn't afford to buy one with a pop top. So we were very snug. Each night we would move all the stuff and put up a hammock across the front. And they were small enough that they could sleep in the little hammock. And then we were, of course, in the back part. And it was very challenging the first few days just to get adjusted. But we go to campgrounds because we traveled on $10 a day, and that's all we had.
Yeah.
And that was for gas, food. We didn't go to restaurants. We fixed everything. We loved it. We went to the little markets and we would get the fresh produce and we would, prepare everything outdoors.
Yep.
Sometimes when the weather was nice. We were actually in Italy when it snowed. We were in a beautiful little village. I'm trying to remember the name. And it was kind of a very cold day and kind of a sad day because we got behind a procession and we learned it was a funeral procession through the village and we couldn't go past it. So we just stopped and enjoyed watching the local scenery. And it was getting quite cold and we were starting to run out of money. And that's when we finally said, well, guess it's time to go back to the United States.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
then when you came back, your husband went to graduate school
He went
and
to
you
graduate. Yeah.
went to the jewelry business. Tell us how
Well,
that started.
oh, I had started making jewelry in the garage when my children were little in our first little house, the one we sold to go to Europe. And when I could get them napping at the same time, I had taken a course in metalsmithing from a French woman, in fact, at the local junior college. I wanted to be a sculptor, but the sculptor class was not available. So I took the jewelry class. I thought, well, I'll learn a lot about working with metal. And I loved it. And I started making jewelry in my garage and I would sell it to my neighbors, earrings and necklaces. I have a couple pieces of my jewelry here. Many years after that, when we got back from Europe and we moved to a very beautiful little town called Ferndale in California, I rented an old barber shop. And my husband's very clever, and he built all the displays out of the barbershop drawers that are in the barbershop.
Neat.
And we painted it and decorated it, fixed it up. And the day I opened my business, I had 11 pieces of jewelry. And so I started producing a lot of jewelry then and ended up getting two wonderful partners who joined me in the business. And we produced a lot for the next 7 years, and that helped support us while my husband went to school. He didn't go for 7 years, he went for 2 years, but we stayed in that beautiful town until he then got a teaching job in Oregon. So this is one piece of my jewelry.
Wow.
A lot of it I don't have anymore. I was working primarily, it was my jewelry shop was called Ferndale Silver Shop. And at first I was working in silver, but gold was very much the popular metal with my customers at that time too. So then I learned to cast and I started casting in gold. And so I was also doing little mini sculptures and I was very into fantasy. And so I did a series of little fairies and this is one of my little theories.
Oh, wow. I love.
So that was a little bit of my jewelry time. I got into glass and I did a little bit of glass work. And so that's a pendant that hangs on a chain. Uh, so that was a little bit of my jewelry work.
Oh, I love it.
It was actually very hard work. And at first I loved it But after many years, I was in the jewelry business for 18 years. And when
Mm.
we moved to Oregon for my husband's first teaching job, I started a shop here. And I had wonderful customers and a great deal of success. But I was very tired all the time because my daughters by that time were in junior high and high school. They helped me on the weekends in the shop. But finally, I did sell the business. I wanted to write. I kept wanting to write. And I also wanted to paint because earlier in my life, I had done a lot of painting and sculpture, started making sculpture earlier. And so I wanted to get back to that. And oh, I
The
feel like
painting behind you?
there is a painting behind me. This is one of a period in our life where we were very interested. My husband had spent time in Japan in the service, and we had a Japanese style home that we designed and built. And this is the rice bowls, a collection of rice bowls. And then I love doing portraits. My portraits are all another, I don't have many of them in here. They're in another, I have a couple in the other part of the
Oh,
house.
everything that you touch turns to art, it seems. And
Well,
that's my claim to fame.
the creative juices just go. I was at a women's conference several years ago, and I was sitting at a round table, and we were each asked to stand up, and these were women of all different ages and backgrounds, and to tell about a little bit about ourselves. We were each given about 5 to 10 minutes. And I said, well, I did this and that, and I've had a wonderful life. And when I sat down, the young woman sitting next to me, who was about 22 years old, she said, oh, Cher, how have you done all of that? And I said, well, if you live long enough and you have lots of ambition and drive and energy and enthusiasm, you'll do that too. Don't you think that's true?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. If you, it's just, you get ideas, and if you have the drive to pursue them, you do a lot.
Bingo.
Yeah, get up and go. That's right. My
Yeah.
dad used to say that. He used to say, honey, you've got all the get up and go in our family. Yeah,
You got up and went to France.
right, right. Yeah, I did. And it's been a wonderful journey. And,
Hmm.
I use that word a lot, journey, because life is a journey. And, there's been moments where we stumble along the way. We pick ourselves back up and we continue the work and we continue the journey. And
Hmm.
I've been very blessed. And I've been blessed, as I said, by a wonderful partner. My husband is always right there. He's also a great cook. So when I'm busy writing or in the studio creating something, he'll surprise me and say, dinner's ready. So I'm very lucky.
That is wonderful.
While we were living in Mexico, we were inspired to go there because my mother had often talked about a visit she had to the village of San Miguel de Allende. It's a well known town for artists and writers and musicians. It's in the beautiful highlands of Mexico. It's got a lot of history. It's where the revolution started, the Mexican Revolution. And when we went there, um, I found out they had a writers' conference every year, an international writings conference. So I started going to that. Also, while we were there, we began to realize that there were so many very desperate migrants coming up through Mexico from Guatemala and from Honduras and El Salvador, where we had done some humanitarian aid work. And we thought we need to find out if there's a shelter for them so that when we run into them on the street and they need help, we'll know where to send them. And we did some research, and through the Red Cross, I was able to find a shelter, not in San Miguel, about 55 minutes away, in a town called Celaya. And we went there, and we were so touched by the work that Pastor Ignacio Ramirez, who started the shelter, was doing, that we said, what can we do to help? Can we volunteer? Can we help with meals? Can we bring clothing? What can we do? And he looked down and he said, the biggest thing for me right now is that every month I have to knock on doors to raise money to pay the rent. He didn't own the building. So I'm a very spontaneous person. And at my husband's great trepidation, I said, oh, that's no problem. We'll pay the rent. So
Hmm.
we quickly realized what we had said, and we are people of our word. So we came back to Portland, Oregon, and we have wonderful friends, and we have friends who are musicians, and we had a concert, and we raised the money for the first several months of the rent. And then my daughter said, Mother, my law firm where I work wants to help you and Dad get an NGO, start an NGO. So we found out about starting a nonprofit. They helped us. We set up the nonprofit, and it's called Latin American Relief Fund. And I had to do our first website. So I learned to walk myself through the website process and learned a lot from that with GoDaddy. And GoDaddy has been great because I've been able to talk to technicians and start it that way. But I'm working on my author one now. It's very much a work in progress. You probably noticed.
It looks good.
Well, it changes day by day. Yeah,
It's clean and easy to navigate. That's the most
yeah,
important thing.
yeah, yeah. So I'm still, I have an advisor who's been kind of telling me some few things to do, and she has explained that I need to have a couple more pages. I was just going to have one page and keep it simple, not a lot of words. And she said, just like you said, Nicola, she said, no, put more about yourself. People want to know that. But I have too much on that first page, so I'm going to move that. So anyway,
So
that's
the NGO is still going.
oh yes, it's now we've been supporting the shelter. In fact, we're very excited. We have a wonderful board. Most of our board members live full time in San Miguel. A few of us live just part time there, which is what we did. So it is still going. And we are now, let's see, we're 5 years old. And 2 years ago, just at the beginning of the pandemic, in fact, we decided we needed to buy the house. And the owner was willing to sell it at a price we thought we could raise money for. And we had a big fundraising campaign. We bought the house. So now it is owned by Pastor Ignacio. We bought it so that he would be the owner and he could concentrate then on other things. He's an amazing man during this time of COVID when he's been taking care of many, many migrants, many who have been living there permanently. 25, I think, I've lived there permanently during that time. We've had not one case of COVID.
Hmm.
And he also has them to come through. By Mexican law, when they come to the migrant shelter, they can spend 3 days and 3 nights there. So he provides meals, warm showers, a safe place to sleep, and clothing, sometimes new backpacks, new shoes. We have a wonderful volunteer who works at the shelter also, who lives in San Miguel. He goes there and does amazing things to help at the shelter. So it's been another journey, by the way. There's the journey part, another journey for us. And we were the start of it, and many people have made it work and function beautifully. And we're very proud of that. And we're very proud of the people who have contributed so much to it. So,
And
yeah, I'm very.
personal stories are part of the treasure. Did you read that on Mike and Pen? The subscript or the motto is endowing treasure through story.
Yes, yes, that
So
is true.
the
Yeah.
stories that you are telling us, these are the treasure that you are giving to us.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You know, all I would love to do is to be able to encourage and inspire others that it's possible. Anything's possible. And you don't have to do all the different things I've done. But, if you have a thought or a dream, try for it, go for it, try it. You can do it. You have to have I do think you do need to have a nature, and I notice you do have that, a very positive attitude that, you can do it. Don't you think that that's really important?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a
That
belief that you have support and a faith that you can achieve the goals you're seeking. Well,
yep.
I had a publisher for the first book, and then for Under the Salvadoran Sun, I was sending out query letters and I wasn't getting any reaction. And I really wanted to get it out. I had a lot of reasons because of the uh, the Latin American Relief Fund too. I thought we were kind of starting that idea. I just thought it was the time immigration was such a big issue and still is, but I thought this is the time to get this book out. And so several people in San Miguel said, "Oh, you don't, oh, I know who it was. Oh, she's Canadian from Toronto." She had posted a little article in the San Miguel Atención, the newspaper, about cover designing, and she was doing a workshop on designing covers. And I thought, oh, well, that's something I'm going to need. I might as well go to her workshop. She's lovely. Her name is Margot Boland, and she had been a cover designer at a Toronto publishing company for 20 years, I think, retired, moved to San Miguel. She said, well, I'll do your cover. I like your story. I sent the story. She said, I like the story. I'll do your cover. And she said, from then, Cher would get a formatter. So then somebody recommended a formatter. She was on the East Coast, and I got hold of her. And she said, oh, I can format your book to go up on Amazon. And so little by little, the book then got pulled together. And Margot came over to my Mexican house one day, and she loved this picture, which I actually have hanging up here.
Oh, you painted it.
No, I didn't, and I won't take credit for it. It is a wonderful print by a man by the name, I gave him credit at the bottom, Fernando Yort, who has since died, sadly, very young. He is the artist laureate of El Salvador. And I wrote him and said, I've written a book about El Salvador, and I'd love to use your image. So I wrote him, and he said, of course you can use my image for your book. I would be honored. So then Margot was delighted because then she created with that, the nice cover.
Very catching.
Yeah. So now with this next book, I did start to send out query letters. I had a gentleman who owns a very big agency in New York, and he and his wife and daughter stayed in my house once for the conference. He's a agent, and you can't get a book published without an agent anymore. I didn't need an agent in 72. I need an agent. And I wrote him in January. I wrote him a query letter, and he was very sweet. It was 9 o'clock at night, and he called me and he said, oh, Cher, it's so nice to hear from you. And I loved Hummingbird House. Our house was called Hummingbird House. And he said, I remember you were such wonderful hosts. But he said, I'm not accepting queries now. I have too many. And then he sent me to 2 other agents. We're not accepting queries now. So I didn't even get a chance to send the manuscript. So then I thought, well, I'll just self-publish again. And then I got a phone call from a hybrid publisher, and they said, we want to publish your book. And I said, how do you even know about me? Well, I had apparently gone in and clicked on links, and they find you, they find you. So I had 3 hybrid publishers calling me. We want to publish your book. I said, you don't even know about my book. Well, I finally did some research, and I went into the Better Business Bureau, and I went to the Consumer Report, and the top one of a hybrid publisher. And maybe you know all about this. Do you know what a hybrid is?
I'm using a hybrid publisher myself.
So I went through the ones that I could find, and I'm having Outskirts Press. I just sent the manuscript 3 days ago when I got it back, fully copied. They kept saying, send the manuscript. I said, I'm not going to send you a manuscript that's not clean. I want to send you, because they don't do the editing. They said we'd proof it at the end, but they don't do editing.
Oh.
I would have had to pay even extra for the editing. So I did pay extra, but I picked the editor I wanted. I've uploaded the book. I'm in the process this week of doing the cover design, because they will give me a custom cover. So I had a model, and I went and photographed her yesterday. I have a scene my cousin sent me from Sweden that's a forest of Bleckinghe woods.
Have you put your books into audio?
You know what? I think audio is marvelous. And I think when it first started, people weren't into it. But now I think audio is a big thing. My daughters, they're working women. They listen to audio stories on their way to work, on their way home, when they're cooking. They put their little things that they listen. I started listening to audio stories. I love, especially if the reader is really good and the voice is good. And I really do want to have my book on audio. And the only thing is, it's terribly expensive. So do you know a way of doing that?
I do my own because I'm a narrator. I've done other people's books as well.
Really?
But
And
do you think you could read your own book?
so listen to me reading this. The sky turned blood red as the sun set over Helga Johansson's family farm in southern Sweden. She peered out her bedroom window at the fields and beyond to the dark Blekinge woods. Her 5-year-old daughter Sophia played at her feet, babbling to her rag doll. Helga turned away from the window and began to pack her carpet bag for the long journey back to her home in America.
Oh, I think you could do it.
But a lot of the main characters, see, that's just the prologue. And then the main character is a young girl. And I think it would need two voices in the story. I could be the grandmother. There is dialogue with the grandmother. And I've actually listened to some audiobooks that have two voices.
Did you like
You
them?
you have a young voice
I could
too.
supply the young part of the voice. But no, you have a really good inflection and everything.
Well, I was another project I did. I was in dramatics through high school and college. I
Well,
was in
there you
plays.
go. There you go. No, what you do, you could be the narrator and the grandma, and you
Yeah,
find someone to do
do
the
the
younger.
young girl's voice. Yeah. Well, wouldn't that be fun? Good.
It
Oh,
is.
lovely
Thank
to
you
talk to
very
you.
much for joining us on Mike and Pen for a wonderful interview. I wish you all the best with your book.
Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed every bit of this interview and I learned so much from my interviewer. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
See you.